the rental crisis, the housing crisis more broadly, is a moral, political and social problem, the scale of which I think very few people are prepared to engage with. We have fundamentally broken one of the key aspects of the social contract in this country, which is the idea that if you work hard and try to get on, you should be able to buy a home. Housing is more expensive right now, it's at the same level, since 1876, about 8 times average earnings, the price of an average house. That was before the invention of the motor car. Queen Victoria was on the throne, and property was the preserve of a wealthy elite. We haven't fully understood the consequences psychologically, economically, in terms of health of younger people, instead of starting their own homes, starting families, and instead living in insecure, often low-quality housing. It is a moral stain on our country.
Damp in our house is awful at this time of year. I'm doing this video as obviously the cost of living crisis is fucking awful, just to spread awareness on damp and mould build up in people's homes. We spoke to the landlord about this. They said the only thing that they could advise was to keep the heating on 20 degrees all day, which is actually impossible. I'm lucky enough to have access to a dehumidifier.
The shower broke, stopped working, started leaking into the kitchen. And my landlord refused to fix it, and 11 months went by and we kept checking in, being like, it's getting bad, there's mould now in the kitchen. Because we were raising the issue, he decided to up our rent by a third. And then after that we were like, okay, well that's fine, if you want to fix it, then we were happy to carry on. But we really like you to fix the shower because it's become quite a problem. During the energy crisis, when you're running like baths to have a wash, you know, I was washing in 3 inches of water because I just couldn't afford to like do any more. Yeah, so the week after we got the notice that our rent was going to be put up, he sent us an eviction notice. So we were evicted over Christmas.
So all this goes all black, and in the winter it's the worst, and the smell is musty and it just stinks. And the council, all they've told me and suggested is that I should do a home swap, and I don't know how they expect me to have a home swap.
They've told you to home swap?
Yeah, they want me to have a home swap. I don't know, in this condition, like who would want a home swap with me like this?
Yeah.
If you're a renter, this is a tip that you don't want to miss. So this is my good deed for the day, because I found this out on TikTok months and months ago when I was moving out, and it literally saved me. So this is about getting your full deposit back. We were convinced we weren't going to get our full deposit back because there were so many emails between us and the letting agent on behalf of the landlord where they were just like requesting really weird things. They were basically saying things like that we hadn't done, which they were then wanting to charge us for. So we were like, this is going to be like pulling teeth. We're not going to get our deposit back. And I came across a comment on TikTok that basically explained what a deposit protection scheme is. And again, I'm not an expert, but the gist of it is basically that landlords, when they take your deposit, it should be held in a deposit protection scheme, which basically means that you're not just giving your deposit to the landlord and they can't just spend it. And it protects the landlord as well as the tenants, because if the tenants have to move out without like a lot of notice or things like that, then obviously if the landlord spent the deposit, then they're going to have to scramble to try and find that money to give the deposit back. So it protects them, but it also, in this case, protects the tenant, because you are entitled to know where your deposit is being held. And a lot of letting agencies and landlords don't do it, because I don't know why they don't do it. I don't know whether it costs money to hold it in a deposit protection scheme, or whether, I don't know what the drawbacks of it are. Again, I'm not an expert, but what I do know is that they were trying to charge us a load of money, and my boyfriend basically said, like, that's fine, but can we please know what the name of the deposit protection scheme is that it was held in? And instantly, the same day, I think, if not maybe the day after, they emailed a reply to that email where they had asked to charge us all this stuff and just said, the landlord's decided to give you your full deposit back.
So we've just had our first people come round to view our flat. We currently pay £935 a month for our 1-bed flat, and the estate agent has just come in and they're putting it up to £1,200. That's not including bills or council tax. That's just revolting. Like, it's not a big flat, like it's not small, but it's not £1,200 for a 1-bed flat excluding bills, I think is mental.
give you a whole list of reasons why I hate renting, but I think top of the list, if not close to the top of the list, would be the house inspections. I hate the fact that they can contact you and say, within 24 hours or within X amount of time, we're going to come round and do a house inspection. It feels like so intrusive and voyeuristic, like I'm an animal in the zoo. They're coming round to see how we live, to check, you know, if the house is up to scratch, if we're living to their standards. I've got nothing to hide at all. I take pride in where I live, I look after my home, but I just don't like the thought of people coming round and judging me based on how I live. I know that there are like a handful of people that don't look after their properties, but I do, and I don't think I should have to justify that or prove that to anyone. I pay my rent, I pay all my bills on time. I hate the fact that they can just come round whenever they please. I think there should be a cap on it. In the last few months, I've had an inspection from my landlord already, and they're coming around again on Wednesday. And I think that's mad. Like, why do you need to come round that many times?
Council, it's a temporary accommodation, and this is the condition. The residents complained to their MP, Ian Duncan Smith, several times. They've complained to the council on being in temporary accommodation since 2014. The response from the council was, they've been in temporary accommodation since 2014, is if they are not happy, they can look for an alternative in the private rented sector.
Schools, teachers, they've written many letters, but still.
So your youngest has got sickle cell?
Sickle cell, and he's asthmatic as well.
And he's asthmatic. And every time it rains, this leaks?
Yeah,
how long's it been like this for?
This one, since we are in 2024. Since 2021.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your house must have been absolutely freezing during winter.
Very, very freezing. And I'm paying a lot for energy, for gas and electric.
To keep the place warm.
Exactly.
So let's talk about housing discrimination. A lot of times when we talk about racism and data, we always talk about it in an American context because the evidence and the data has been collected, but we really lack in that area in the UK because we're only literally just talking about racism openly. So in America, they had something called redlining, and that is where they created a security map in the 1930s, and they made sure they colour-coded areas that could receive mortgages and loans, low interest rates, access to good healthcare and schools. The green and blue areas were like go zones. That's where good people live. The bad areas were redlined, and that's where black people live. And everything's intersectional. So if they were in these areas, they would lack access to literally everything: education, healthcare, the line. Now, although we didn't have Jim Crow laws in the UK, we did have local authorities that created policies that would stop black people from living in certain areas. So in Birmingham in 1975, the local authority created a housing policy that said that black people couldn't live in certain all-white areas, and if they were to be placed there under extreme circumstances, that they would have to have 6 white neighbours on either side of them because they didn't want too many black people in the area. And actually, even into the 80s and 90s, the people who lived in South Birmingham would regularly protest and petition when black people were to be moved into their area. Even when these policies were removed, it was still found that local authorities would exclude black and brown people from living in better quality areas with better quality homes. The report also found that in 2012, that ethnic minorities were 3 times more likely to be allocated a house in both an ethnically diverse area and an economically deprived area. So this tells us that housing discrimination isn't something that happened, 100 years ago or even 30 years ago. It's still here today.
So this is why we hate landlords. Here's the situation. So the company that my landlord uses to manage his houses apparently has to do like a mid-contract report about how the house is, right? And in this evaluation, I managed to complain about issues that I'm having with the apartment, okay? So my window here has a pretty big gap to the outside, as you can see, okay? And this is something that I have complained before by email, and they sent someone here that said basically the window is too small, right? Needs to be changed. It would cost around 3 or 4K. And the lady today told me that, oh yes, we spoke with the landlord and he's just refusing to fix it. So aren't you supposed to have money from the rent to save for maintenance of the apartment? What the fuck is this shit?
Guys, I've met the most terrible landlord in London, so here's what happened. He readjusts the rent whenever he wants, and yesterday he sent me a text insisting that he will enter my room without my permission. He claimed that he has every right as a landlord to enter my room without my permission, just like what he did before, entering our property without any notice and seeking permission from the tenants. I'll show you guys the conversation at the end. Okay, so my contract ended in July this year, so both parties never mentioned anything about it, so it will automatically switch to rolling tenancy. Last month, the landlord wanted to readjust the rent. He asked us to start paying for the bills since the electricity prices have gone up. We kinda disagreed at first because we wanted a flat rate increase, but then he rejected this idea and said that if he was to do that, he would increase £100 for each of us. He didn't want to do this because it would be unfair for us, which is kind of true because £100 for bills is kind of too much. After hearing what he suggested, we went with this plan, which is paying our own bills. Then yesterday, he texted and talked to all of us saying that he wants to readjust the rent again. This time, he will increase £150 for bills on top of our current rent. And the fixed period should be at least 12 months with no early termination, which makes it £1,000 for me each month. And he said that if we do not wish to continue, we should move out in 2 weeks. Again, that's against the law.
Don't be a rogue landlord. London landlords beware. This year, a landlord called Jay Valland was discovered trying to fit 40 tenants into a typical 4-bedroom house in Wembley. This brought him £360,000 in rent, which is a lot of money, but in response, Brent Council imposed a 5-year ban on Valland and prevented him from renting out any more properties in the UK. This marks the first time the council has exercised this kind of authority since it was granted in 2018. He was fined £30,000 and ordered to pay £3,500 to Willesden Magistrates Court. If Valland disregards this order, he could face further legal consequences and potentially a criminal conviction.